Longleaf pine is probably the quintessential southern tree in southern forest. It has characteristics that have great value for construction. It's attractive, it's strong, it's rot resistant, uh, easily worked, straight grained, very few knots naturally. But beyond that, it has tremendous value as an ecosystem. The entire longleaf ecosystem may be the most diverse terrestrial ecosystem on our continent. It certainly rivals any others. And all of the diversity is in the understory. It's as many as 50 plant species per square meter in functioning longleaf forest. When you talk about a longleaf forest, it is almost completely a longleaf forest. Unlike many other forests that are made up of several tree species, longleaf forests were historically and when managed today almost entirely longleaf in the tree component. But the diversity is in the understory, the grasses and wildflowers and legumes that inhabit that forest floor are almost unrivaled on this continent and almost any other terrestrial ecosystem. The legume community, for instance, can be as many as 100,000 stems per acre of legumes in fire-maintained longleaf forests, each of them providing nitrogen taken from the air and fixed and redeposited in the soil, essentially fertilizing the forest as it grows. Provides great wildlife habitat, seeds for wildlife. The needles of longleaf pine are longer than any of the other southern pines. In fact, I think all of the pines. They may be up to 30 inches long, typically 18 to 24 inches long. Beautiful. It's really interesting. If you people sometimes wonder, is this a longleaf or another pine? And one of the visual characteristics of longleaf is the branches are stout, but they dip down very gracefully and then turn back up, and all the needles are at the ends of the branches, sort of like a cheerleader's pom-pom or an explosion of, remember the old childhood sparklers? They look like green sparklers. Longleaf has a grass stage when it doesn't grow a stem, just the bud. It sits right on top of the ground. It goes through a stage when it's 5 or 6, up 3 feet tall to 6 feet tall, but hardly ever has any limbs, just a trunk and needles. And some people call it the bottle brush stage, and then slowly begins to grow limbs, lateral limbs. And one of the things that makes it a particularly valuable timber tree is that it prunes limbs very well. It doesn't retain limbs very well, so it doesn't have knots. It's wind firm. It's the most wind firm of the southern pines, and in a hurricane-prone region, that's important. It is highly resistant to all of the major diseases of southern pines. It's almost completely immune to attack by southern pine beetles, one of the most important pests in the south. The grasses provide not only nesting habitat and some forage, but fuels for fires. And that may be the most unique thing about longleaf forest. Even though some longleaf forests today may have occupied those sites for 500 years, it is not a climax forest. It's a subclimax forest maintained by fire. Fire is a frequent and necessary part of the longleaf story. We think virtually all of the uplands in the south burned on the average every 3 to 5 years, with or without human intervention. Lightning ignited fires. And each fire creates conditions for the next fire. It prepares fuels for the next fire. The tree has evolved to be virtually fireproof throughout its life. From its earliest, when it's about a year old from seed, it can stand fire. So frequent fire is not only natural in that ecosystem, it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were concerned that fires would destroy wildlife habitat or kill wildlife species, but we've since learned that the species that are endemic to longleaf forest, like the tree itself, evolved with fire. They have mechanisms that allow them to cope with fire. It is a destructive agent in the forest for some things, but they have refuges. Gopher tortoises, indigo snakes, for instance, go underground.
Mm-hmm.
Insects can fly up into trees. Birds, of course, can escape it. The animals like turkeys and deer have evolved with fire to the point that very often as fires creep across the landscape, I've seen deer and turkeys standing within feet of a fire, feeding, sometimes step over the fire to eat newly roasted acorns. One of the things that's really unique about the tree, one of the many things, is that it's the most long-lived of the southern pines. We're beginning to think it never dies of old age. The single largest cause of mortality in mature longleaf is light, and it grows throughout its life. It never quits growing, unlike other southern pines. It's a legacy tree and forest, and we think that has real appeal to families, to landowners.
Mm-hmm.
That when you establish a longleaf forest and manage it, it's there for as long as we'll be here.